Hello, I'm Stephan Schwartz. I want to welcome you to Schwartz Report. Recently, I have been spending a considerable amount of time thinking about and doing research on AI, artificial intelligence, and what it is likely to do to our cultures. And the more I've thought about it, the more I have become convinced that one of the keys to the future and dealing with AI is dealing with human creativity, intuition, and innovation. So that's what I'm going to talk about. And it's going to be a two-parter. I'm going to talk about it. And then on the second part, I'm going to teach you a series of techniques for allowing your own creativity to come out. So first, we're going to give you some context. And second of all, I'm going to teach you techniques for allowing your own creativity to express itself. When you think about these creative events that change history, what you discover is they come in the night or unexpectedly on a walk on a park or playing games with a friend or in meditation. Not at all what you'd expect. That is the provenance of creative breakthroughs that have changed the course of human history. These intuitive, creative insights of single men and women that alter the whole course of human development. Example, Nikola Tesla's invention of the electric motor at the end of the 19th century came in a vision as he was walking across a city park in New York. Mozart and Copland had music come to them in an instant. Einstein saw relativity after he had been sick and was idling away at afternoon in a canoe. And he had this kind of vision. He later wrote, and this is a quote, "I believe in intuition and inspiration. Imagination is more important than knowledge, for knowledge is limited, whereas imagination embraces the entire world. It stimulates progress, gives birth to evolution, and it is, strictly speaking, a real factor in scientific research." Now, that's a quote from a man who is regarded as one of the great intellectuals in human history. So one of the things that you become clear as I did this research was that creativity concerns both the individual and the society, and that our survival as a species is determined by our creative solution of problems that are so well known that reciting them would be a cliche. Our proficiency in understanding the creative process and our success in nurturing its dynamic in our culture is going to determine the role we and our values and our culture play in the world, whether our vision or another directs the course of future events. And as you look at what's going on in the world, you look at what China is doing, for instance, leading the way in so many areas, and we are no longer a leader in so many areas. You realize that these shifts occur in history in large part because of creativity. I hadn't really fully appreciated that until I put in this research. But one does not need to be sophisticated in historical analysis to recognize the impact a single creative individual can have on society, how harmful suppression of creative initiative is to both individuals and the society. These are the issues which should be in the forefront of our awareness as we push forward and we deal with AI, because it's going to affect our understanding of the world. And I really, as a person who has been doing research in this for many years, had not really fully appreciated both the potential and the threat that AI poses. So how great can the contribution of a single individual be, really? Well, I want to give you an example that is sufficiently removed in time and by a person you've probably never heard of to show you how this really is possible and how a single individual can change the whole course of his country. I'm speaking here of a German chemist named Paul Ehrlich. This single man and the teams he led were responsible for a long list of pharmaceutical breakthroughs, including the first synthesis of a quinine substitute, a cure for sleeping sickness, and the most effective pre-antibiotic cure for syphilis. And although Ehrlich died in 1917, so great was the creative momentum that his work and his team produced that the historian Henry Hobhouse noted, and this is a quote, "In explosives, fertilizers, pharmaceuticals, the synthetic substances of all kinds, the German chemical industry was able to survive the defeat of World War I, poor government, the inflation of the 20s, the depression, largely because of the technological lead derived from Ehrlich and his pupils. Today, information is available at a rate unimaginable 20 years ago. It's become possible to buy a digital file that has everything about a culture that can be reduced to digital data. I mean, think about that. 20 years ago, you couldn't do any of this. Now, you can get everything about a culture that can be made digital. It's literature, it's history, it's statistics, it's arts. You can go up and do a search on Google, for instance, and find out stuff that 20, 30 years ago you couldn't have found anywhere except if you'd been given access to the personal files or something. If we believe the words of Einstein and Mozart and others, however, now that this digitalization of culture is possible, it is very clear quite quickly as you do the research that the relationship between non-local consciousness and intellect is a relationship that is critical, that holds the key to our future. Consider this description of Brahms, who was describing his act of composition of music. He said, "In this exalted state, I see clearly what is obscure in my ordinary moods. Then I feel capable of drawing inspiration from above, as Beethoven did. These vibrations assume the form of distinct mental images, and straightway the ideas flow in upon me. Not only do I see distinct themes in the mind's eye, but they are clothed in the right forms, harmonies, and orchestration. Measure by measure, the finished product is revealed to me when I am in these rare inspired moods. I have to be in a semi-trance condition to get such results, a condition when the conscious mind is in temporary abeyance and the subconscious is in control, for it is through the subconscious mind, which is part of the omnipotence, that the inspiration comes." Now, that was an articulation of non-local consciousness, non-local perception, decades before science understood non-local consciousness. For instance, I'm one of the people that created something called remote viewing. It's a technique for accessing non-local consciousness. It's called remote viewing. And when ordinary people are asked to carry out a remote viewing task, something which involves the location of something or a person or a place, something that they couldn't possibly know, that from which they're separated by space or time, we have discovered in our research in remote viewing, the group of us that have been doing this for the last 50 years, that it is possible for people to access anything, any kind of information. It's telling us that consciousness is causal and fundamental, and that what we are dealing with is information, a domain of information that is outside of space-time. So, as we explore that and seek to understand that, we begin to get a sense of how humanity and creativity can function differently than artificial intelligence, which can gather all of the factual information available, but so far as we know, cannot access non-local consciousness. I want to give you an example of how this plays out and why it's important. A researcher named Douglas Dean, working with another man named John Michalowski at the Newark Institute of Technology, carried out a series of experiments involving 385 chief executive officers of American corporations. They got these 385 CEOs who agreed to participate, and they asked them to precognitively predict 100 randomly selected numbers. And then the results were correlated with the financial reports on those corporations. And what they discovered was that in every experiment, a positive correlation, that is, the CEO got the numbers that he was asked to predict correct, that when they were successful at doing this precognitive non-local perception task, that their corporations had a higher level of financial performance, and that the correlation was so strong that Dean, and I knew this man well, he was a very careful researcher, that Douglas Dean was able to examine the financial reports of a corporation and predict how the CEO would do based on his next financial annual report. They got so good at this that they discovered that those CEOs that were really good at doing these precognitive tasks produced better financial performance. So as our technology increases and the role of creativity and its relation to non-local consciousness becomes better understood, we will see that accessing this part of ourselves, particularly as AI develops and threatens to dominate human culture, that this ability to access the non-local is going to become more and more important. Next week, I'm going to go through this process and show you a technique which you can learn and do, a 6-step process that will allow you to express your own creativity. And it is in the expression by many individuals of their creativity that humanity will remain dominant in its own future. So until next week, thank you.